Hello there. I am so glad you found your way here tonight. Take a moment, just one moment to settle into the space around you. Adjust your pillows, pull the quilt a little higher, and let the weight of the day begin to dissolve into the shadows of the room. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to solve any problems or plan for tomorrow. For the next few hours, your only task is to listen, to let my voice be a soft thread that you follow, leading you away from the noise of the modern world and back, deep into the velvet folds of time. Tonight, we are traveling to a world of candlelight and cold stone, of silken whispers and secrets kept behind heavy oak doors. We are going to speak of a woman whose name has been carved into history with the sharpness of a diamond on glass. Catherine de Medici. You might have heard her called the Serpent Queen. Perhaps you've been told she was a merchant's daughter who brought the dark arts of Italy to the French court, a woman who carried poison in her rings and coldness in her heart. But as the fire in our hearth burns low and the world outside grows still, I want you to forget those caricatures. History is rarely written by those who truly understood the weight of the crown. It is written by the survivors, and often by the enemies. Tonight, we aren't looking for a villain. We are looking for a girl who was born into a storm, who learned that silence was her greatest shield, and whose pulse beat with the terrifying rhythm of survival. Before she was a queen, before she was a mother to kings, she was simply Catherine, a child of Florence, a city of gold and blood. Can you see it? Close your eyes and let the image form. It is a late evening in the year 1519. The air in Florence is thick with the scent of lilies and the damp, earthy breath of the Arno River. The streets are narrow, paved with stones that have seen centuries of ambition. High above, the Duomo's dome sits like a silent guardian against the starlit sky. In the Medici Palace, the air is heavy, not with celebration, but with a strange, hollow quiet. Catherine has just been born, but there are no joyful bells ringing for her. Instead, there is the flickering of beeswax candles and the hushed prayers of servants. Within weeks of her birth, she is an orphan. Both her parents are gone, taken by the fevers that haunted the Renaissance. At just a few days old, she is the Duchessina, the little Duchess, the sole legitimate heir to the immense Medici fortune. And yet, she is the loneliest soul in all of Italy. Imagine the weight of that silence in a nursery filled with gold. She is a pawn before she can even speak, a tiny breathing piece of gold that the great powers of Europe want to claim. But for now, in this moment of the story, she is safe. She is wrapped in the finest linens, rocked by nurses who speak in low, melodic tones. The chaos of the world, the popes, the kings, the armies, all of that is outside the heavy palace walls. Inside, there is only the rhythmic breathing of a child. This is where our journey begins, not with an explosion of power, but with a quiet endurance. Catherine learned very early that to stay alive, one must become a master of the shadow. She learned to watch, to listen, to wait for the right moment to breathe. As we drift deeper into her world, I want you to feel that same stillness. Feel the coolness of the Florentine night air on your skin. Listen to the distant echo of a night watchman's footsteps on the cobbles below. Everything is moving slowly. The ink is drying on the parchment of history. The wax is dripping slowly down the side of the silver candlestick. We are leaving the safety of the nursery now. The years are beginning to turn like the heavy pages of a manuscript. The little Duchessina is growing, her eyes becoming wider, taking in every detail of the dangerous game being played around her. She is learning that a smile can be a mask, and that a kind word can be a distraction. There is a shift in the air. The peace of the palace is about to be broken by the sound of shouting in the streets, by the glint of iron in the sun. The world wants a piece of the Medici girl, and they are coming to take it. But as the doors of the convent swing open to receive her, Catherine isn't afraid. She is simply preparing. Stay with me. Let your breath match the slow, steady pace of the years. We are moving toward the walls of a sanctuary that will soon become a prison. and a prison that will become a school. Do you hear that? The distant sound of a heavy iron key turning in a lock? That is where we go next. To the place where a young girl discovers that when you are surrounded by enemies, the most dangerous thing you can possess is not a dagger, but an untraceable mind. Before the sun rises on the French court, we must first survive the shadows of the cloisters. The air in Florence during the spring of Catherine's youth did not feel like a battlefield. To a child, the world is only as large as the gardens she wanders, and the shadows that dance on her bedroom ceiling. Can you feel the gentle warmth of the Tuscan sun? It's a soft golden weight on your shoulders, filtered through the tall, narrow windows of the Medici villa. Outside, the hills of Fiesole are draped in silver-green olive groves, and the scent of blooming lilies, the symbol of the city, drifts on a breeze, so light it barely disturbs the silk curtains. As you lie here, imagine your breath slowing down to match the pace of that Florentine afternoon. In this house of stone and art, Catherine was a quiet observer. She was a child of immense wealth, yes, but wealth is a cold companion for an orphan. She was moved like a precious jewel from one relative to another, from the care of a grandmother to an aunt, and eventually into the watchful eyes of the papacy in Rome. But let's stay in Florence for a moment longer. Imagine the sound of her small leather shoes clicking softly against the cool marble floors. There is no shouting here, only the distant, rhythmic splashing of a fountain in a courtyard. The water rises and falls, a liquid heartbeat that reminds us that time, even in its most turbulent moments, has a steady grounding flow. Catherine spent many of these early years surrounded by beauty that was meant to last forever. She saw statues carved from stone so white it looked like frozen light. She walked past frescoes where the colors deep lapis lazuli blues and rich cinnabar reds seemed to pulse with a life of their own. This was her education. Not just books and Latin, but the understanding of how beauty can be used to command respect. How a silent room can hold more power than a crowded square. Think of her sitting by a window as the dusk begins to settle over the Arno River. The sky turns a bruised purple, then a deep, ink-wash, indigo. This is the safe space we find for her, the quiet interval between the tragedies of her birth and the storms of her adulthood. In these years she was protected by the name Medici. To be a Medici in Italy was to be surrounded by an invisible fortress of gold and influence. Even when she was sent to the convent of Murate, it wasn't a place of hardship at first. It was a place of ritual. The low, communal chanting of the nuns at dawn, the smell of beeswax and old parchment, the repetitive motion of embroidery needle through silk, pull, and return. Needle through silk, pull, and return. There's a profound peace in repetition. It anchors the mind. As you listen to the cadence of my voice, let yourself feel that same rhythmic anchor. You are safe in the repetition of the story. Catherine thrived in the silence of the cloister. She learned that when you speak less, you hear more. She watched how the nuns managed their small world with nothing but soft words and unwavering discipline. She was a child, but she was absorbing a truth that most people never learn, that the world is built on structures, and if you understand the structure, you can survive anything. The world outside the convent walls was beginning to groan with the weight of political shifts. The Medici family, once the darlings of Florence, were facing the flickering shadows of resentment. But inside, Catherine was learning to paint, to read the stars, and to understand the herbal properties of the plants in the kitchen garden. Lavender for sleep, rosemary for remembrance, thyme for courage. Feel the coolness of the convent's stone walls against your palms. It is a solid, unmoving reality. While the kings and popes argued over her future as if she were a piece of territory on a map, Catherine remained tucked away in this pocket of stillness. This was her cocoon. But every cocoon must eventually open. The safety of the stone walls and the scent of incense was a preparation for a much sharper reality. The relaxed phase of her life was reaching its twilight. The city of Florence, so beautiful in the sun, was about to turn its face toward the moon, revealing a much darker expression. Listen closely. Beyond the sound of the splashing fountain and the chanting nuns, there is a new sound. It's the low rumble of a city in unrest. It's the heavy thud of a closing gate. The safe world is beginning to vibrate with a tension that Catherine cannot yet name. As we leave the gardens of her youth, take one last deep breath of that Florentine air lilies, dust, and ancient stone. We are moving now from the light of the courtyard into the long torch-lit corridors of a city under siege. The little Duchessina is about to find out that a sanctuary can become a target in a single night. And as the shadows grow longer, she will have to decide, will she be the girl who trembles, or the woman who watches the fire and learns how to breathe through the smoke? The gates are locking. The torches are being lit. And in the silence of her cell, Catherine is waiting. Next, we see what happens when the world finally comes for the Medici girl, and how she turns a moment of absolute terror into the first brick of her empire. The year is 1527, and the golden light of the Renaissance is casting long, distorted shadows. Outside the heavy oak doors of the Murate convent, the world has set itself on fire. Florence is in revolt. The Medici family has been cast out, their statues toppled, their names cursed in the plazas. But for a moment, I want you to feel the contrast. Feel the immense, cooling thickness of the stone walls that surround Catherine. While the city screams, the convent breathes. There is a strange kind of safety in a siege. It is the safety of knowing exactly where the danger is. It is always outside. Inside, there is the scent of old wood, the cold touch of rosary beads, and the steady, flickering light of a single oil lamp. Catherine is now 8 years old. A child, yes, but a child who is learning that a wall is not just stone, it is time. It is the time you buy yourself to think while your enemies exhaust themselves at the gate. Close your eyes and imagine the long, vaulted hallways of the convent at midnight. The air is still, carrying the faint metallic tang of the nearby river. Catherine lies in her small cell. She can hear the distant, muffled roar of the mob. They are calling for her. They call her the little Duchess, and they debate her fate as if she were a piece of stray wood to be thrown into a bonfire. Some suggest hanging her from the walls. Others, more cruel, suggest things no child should ever hear. But Catherine does not tremble. Not in a way I expect. Instead, she wraps herself in the silence of the nuns. She observes the sisters as they move like ghosts through the shadows, their habits rustling like dry leaves. They are her shield. In this moment, the convent is a fortress of prayer and pragmatism. The Mother Superior places a hand on Catherine's shoulder, a firm, steady weight. This is your safe harbor. No matter how loud the world becomes, there is always a center of gravity that remains unmoved. As the months of the siege turn into years, the girl begins to change. She realizes that her life is a currency. To the rebels, she is a hostage. To the Pope, she is a pawn. To herself, she must become a player. She begins to dress in the habit of the nuns, cutting her hair, blending into the shadows of the altar. She's learning the art of the invisible presence. If they cannot distinguish you from the sacred ground you stand on, they cannot hurt you. Can you feel the slow, rhythmic pulse of this life? The morning matins, the midday silence, the evening vespers. Even in a city under siege, the bells mark the time with indifferent precision. Ding gai, ding she, ding ding dim duai. Let that sound settle your heart. The chaos of men is temporary. The structure of the spirit is enduring. Then the reveal comes not with a bang, but with a whisper. One night, the soldiers of the Republic break into the convent. They come to take her, to use her as a human shield on the battlements. Catherine stands before them. She does not cry. She does not beg. She looks at them with eyes that have grown old in the dark. She tells them, with a voice as cold as the marble floor, that she belongs to God and the Medici, and that any hand laid upon her will be a curse upon their souls. She is 8 years old, and she has just mastered her first act of political theater. The soldiers, hardened men of war, find themselves stepping back. There is a power in a child who does not fear the dark, because she has become a part of it. The siege eventually breaks. The gates open. The Medici return in a storm of iron and blood to reclaim their city. But as Catherine steps out into the blinding sunlight of the Florentine plaza, she is no longer the Duchess Sina who played with dolls. She is a survivor who has looked into the mouth of the wolf and didn't blink. Let us return to that feeling of safety now. The danger has passed. The soldiers have retreated into the pages of history. The sun is setting over the Arno once again, painting the water in shades of honey and copper. Catherine is being prepared for a new journey, not as a captive, but as a prize. Her uncle, the Pope, has a plan for her. A plan that involves a long journey across the sea to a land of lilies and mist. To France. Feel the gentle rocking of a carriage beginning to move. The clip-clop of horses on the cobblestones is a lullaby, taking us away from the trauma of the siege and toward the uncertainty of a throne. The air is changing. It's growing cooler, Saltier. We are moving toward the coast, toward the great blue expanse that separates Catherine from her destiny. Sleep now, knowing that the walls held. The girl survived. And as the rhythm of the carriage wheels lulls you deeper into the night, remember, the most silent rooms often house the loudest ambitions. The sea is waiting, and in the mist of the French horizon, a young prince is waiting too. But he is not the hero of this story. He is merely the next gate Catherine must learn to open. Imagine, if you will, a morning so bright it feels as though the world is made of glass and gold. The year is 1533. Daria. The frantic, dusty noise of Florence has faded into a memory, replaced by the eternal rhythmic sigh of the Mediterranean Sea. You are standing on the deck of a massive galley, its hull painted a deep royal crimson, and gilded with leaf that shimmers under the relentless Italian sun. This is the fleet of the Pope, and at its heart, amidst the billowing white silk sails and the scent of expensive incense, sits Catherine. She is 14 years old, and she is sailing toward a kingdom that does not want her, to marry a prince she has never met. Take a deep breath. Can you smell it? The sharp, bracing salt of the sea air mingling with the heavy, sweet perfume of the Vatican elite. The ship beneath your feet doesn't jerk or shudder, it sways. Up, down, and down. Up, dot, and down. It is the pulse of the tide, a liquid lullaby that carries the young Duchess Sina away from the only world she has ever known. Catherine sits perfectly still, draped in layers of heavy Florentine velvet and pearls the size of hazelnuts. She is a masterpiece of political branding. She is the merchant's daughter, a girl whose dowry is so immense it can fund a king's wars. Yet she is sailing into a court that prides itself on bloodlines, not bank accounts. As the coastline of Italy dissolves into a thin blue line, let yourself sink into this feeling of suspension. You are between two worlds. The immersed stage of our journey is this voyage a dreamlike passage where the rules of the land no longer apply. The galley glides toward Marseille, and as it enters the harbor, the world explodes into a muted, distant celebration. Can you hear it? The deep, hollow thrum of ceremonial cannons. In the world of sleep, these aren't violent sounds. They are like soft thunder at the edge of a summer horizon, grounding you in the gravity of the moment. Upon the docks of France, Catherine meets her destiny in the form of King Francis I. He is a giant of a man, smelling of leather, wine, and ambition. Beside him stands Henry, the Duke of Orleans. He is also 14, but his eyes are dark pools of melancholy. When they meet, there is no spark of fairy tale romance. There's only the cold, dry rustle of parchment, the sound of a marriage contract being fulfilled. Now, let us transition into a space of safe isolation. Despite the thousands of spectators, the banquets that last until dawn, and the glittering halls of the French court, Catherine is profoundly alone. But in that loneliness, there is a sanctuary. In the safe silence of her new chambers, she begins to observe. She realizes that the French court is a labyrinth of mirrors. Everyone is performing. Everyone is wearing a mask of silk and smiles. She discovers, with a quiet, stinging clarity, that her husband's heart is already occupied. Henry is obsessed with Diane de Poitiers, a woman twice his age, a moon goddess of the court who holds him in a thrall Catherine cannot yet break. But instead of crying out, instead of fighting a battle she cannot win, Catherine does something remarkable. She exhales. She lets the rejection settle into her bones like a cool mist. She decides to become a shadow. Feel the slow story of her first years in France. It is a time of extreme patience. The rhythm of her life becomes one of careful, deliberate study. She learns the French tongue, softening her sharp Italian vowels until they flow like honey. She learns the intricate steps of the court dances, moving so gracefully that she becomes a part of the architecture. She is the devoted wife who never complains. She is the daughter-in-law who listens more than she speaks. As you lie there, imagine the flickering candlelight in the great hall of the Louvre. The music is low, the haunting, repetitive pluck of a lute. Catherine is there, always in the background, a quiet figure in black and gold. She is watching the way power flows from the king to his mistresses, the way whispers travel down the long, drafty corridors. She is mapping the terrain of her new home, brick by brick, secret by secret. The return to safe here is the realization that Catherine has survived the transition. She is no longer the hostage of Florence. She is a princess of France. The walls of the palace are thick. The guards at the door are hers. For now, the world is quiet. The political storms are brewing, but they are far away. But as the night deepens and the palace grows cold, a new silence begins to haunt her. It is the silence of her own rooms, a nursery that remains empty. 1 year passes. Then 2. Then 5. The whispers in the hallway change from the Italian girl to the barren woman. The crown is slipping before she has even touched it. Do you hear the slow, steady ticking of the clock? Each grain of sand is a day of her youth passing by without an heir. Catherine is about to enter her darkest decade, a time of desperate prayers and bitter tonics, where she will have to prove that her womb is as strong as her will. But for tonight, let the weight of the velvet blankets hold you still. The ship has docked. The girl has survived the sea. And as the moon hangs over the spires of Paris, Catherine de Medici is closing her eyes, preparing for a war that will last 10 long, silent years. Sleep now, for the shadows are long, and the secrets are just beginning to breathe. 10 years. It is a span of time that feels like an eternity, when every sunrise brings a new whisper and every sunset carries a new threat. We are now deep within the heart of the French court. A place that looks like a dream of gold and marble, but feels like a cage of cold iron. For Catherine, these 10 years from 1533 to 1543 were not lived in the spotlight of royalty, but in the suffocating shadows of the barren Italian. Let yourself sink into the atmosphere of the Louvre at midnight. The stone walls are thick, draped in heavy tapestries that muffle the sound of the world outside. The air is cool, carrying the faint, lingering scent of burnt beeswax and the metallic tang of the charcoal braziers. In the center of this stillness is Catherine. She is no longer the child of Florence. She is a woman in her early 20s. A woman whose position is as fragile as a sheet of thin ice over a deep, dark lake. In this immersion, feel the weight of her isolation. Imagine the long, echoing galleries where the courtiers gather. As Catherine walks by, the conversations don't stop. They simply drop to a hum, a low vibration of judgment. 10 years without a child. In the 16th century, a princess had only one true currency, an heir. Without a son, she was a failed investment. There were whispers of divorce, whispers of sending her back to Italy in disgrace. whispers that she was cursed by the very Medici gold that bought her way here. But listen to the silence of her response. While the court gossiped, Catherine was creating her own world. This was the birth of her intelligence network, not yet the beautiful spies of legend, but a small, loyal network of those who were also overlooked. The servants who cleaned the hearths, the stable boys who heard the secrets of drunken nobles, the ladies-in-waiting who noticed whose carriage stayed too long at a certain gate. The scene shifts now, moving from the public humiliation of the ballroom to the private, desperate sanctuary of the apothecary's chamber. Feel the change in the air. It becomes thick, herbal, and strange. To save her marriage and her life, Catherine turned to the fringes of science and superstition. Imagine the sound of a mortar and pestle grinding slowly. Crush and turn. Crush and turn. This rhythmic sound is a focal point for your mind. She drank bitter tonics of ground mare's teeth and sought the counsel of astronomers and mystics, including a young man who would later be known as Nostradamus. In the slow unfolding of her story, we see the true steel in her soul. Most would have broken under the pressure. Most would have fled or faded into a convent. But Catherine leaned into the discomfort. She made herself indispensable to King Francis I, her father-in-law. She became his constant companion on hunts, riding her horse with a daring Italian style that the French ladies feared. She talked art with him, philosophy with him, and poetry with him. She realized that while she couldn't yet control her husband's heart, she could secure the king's protection. As you lie there, feel the patience of the weaver. Over and under. Over and under. She was weaving a web of protection around herself. Every night, she returned to her rooms, dismissed her attendants, and sat by the fire. Despite the looming threat of divorce, there was a peace in her preparation. She knew that she was doing everything humanly possible to survive. The reveal of this decade is a quiet one. It wasn't a sudden miracle, but a shift in the light. In 1544, the silence was finally broken by the cry of a newborn. A son, Francis, and then another, and another. The barren Italian became the mother of kings. The threat of the convent vanished, replaced by the heavy gold chains of the Regency. Catherine had won the first great battle of her life, but the cost was her innocence. She no longer trusted the sunlight. She trusted the shadows. Do you hear the soft rustle of silk against stone? That is Catherine walking through the corridors of power, no longer a victim, but a master. She is beginning to realize that secrets are more deadly than swords, and she has 10 years' worth of secrets stored in her heart. Sleep now, draped in the safety of the night. The weaver has finished her first tapestry, but the next one will be embroidered with the darkest threads of all. Close your eyes and imagine the air in the palace of Fontainebleau as autumn settles over the French countryside. The smell of damp earth and wood smoke drifts through the tall leaded glass windows, mingling with the scent of old tapestries and polished oak. Catherine is no longer merely a mother. She has become something far more intricate. She has become a weaver of invisible threads. In this space of deep observation, feel the quiet power of her presence. Imagine Catherine standing at the edge of a great ballroom. To the casual observer, she is a silent figure in black, easily overlooked next to the radiant Diane de Poitiers. But Catherine is not watching the dancers. She is watching the gaps between them. She is noticing who whispers to whom, whose hand lingers a second too long on a sword hilt, and whose eyes dart toward the door when the king enters. She has realized that in a court built on vanity, information is the only true currency. We move away from the music of the ballroom now, entering the small, dimly lit study where Catherine keeps her most private accounts. The sound here is the rhythmic, scratchy scritch of a quill on parchment. This is a grounding sound, steady and meditative. Scritch, odd, when dip the ink. Scritch. She is recording the human heart. In this slow, deliberate narrative, we explore her most brilliant realization, that your greatest enemy is simply an ally who hasn't been given the right incentive yet. Catherine does not move against those who hate her. Instead, she pulls them closer. She finds the courtier who is drowning in gambling debts and quietly pays them off through a nameless merchant. She finds the neglected mistress of a powerful duke and sends her a gift of rare Italian lace. She is not asking for favors. Not yet. She is simply laying the threads. She is making the world of the French court dependent on her quiet, invisible hand. Return to a sense of safety as you visualize Catherine in her private garden. It is a place of geometric symmetry, hedges of boxwood and lavender, perfectly trimmed. There is a profound sense of order here. Just as she prunes the stray branches of her roses, she is pruning the chaos of the court. When you have a secret on every man at the table, you are never truly in danger. You are the most secure person in the room because you are the only one who knows the whole truth. As you lie there, let the rhythm of your breath mimic the patience of the spider. In, and out. Still and steady. Catherine does not rush. She knows that a secret is like a fine wine. It must age until the moment it is opened is most effective. The truth revealed in this moment is a chilling one. Catherine discovers a plot by a group of nobles to undermine her influence over the king. Instead of telling her husband, she invites the leader of the plot to a private dinner. She doesn't mention the conspiracy. She simply talks about his family, his lands, and a very specific, very private debt he owes to a bank in Florence, a bank owned by her cousins. She watches him realize, over a glass of red wine, that she holds his life in her pale, jeweled hands. She smiles a soft, motherly smile and offers him a piece of fruit. By the end of the night, he is no longer her enemy. He is her most loyal informant. Now, the palace is falling into a deep, velvety slumber. The torches in the hallways have been extinguished, leaving only the faint glow of the embers. Catherine sits by her window looking out at the moonlit forest. She is the only one awake, the only one who sees the patterns in the dark. But as the wind whistles through the stone gargoyles, a new name begins to echo in the corridors. A name that represents a threat Catherine cannot buy or bribe. The drums of religious war are beginning to beat in the distance. Sleep now, safe in the knowledge that for this moment, the web is holding. The world is organized. The secrets are locked away. And as you drift deeper into the night, remember, the most dangerous person is not the one holding the sword, but the one who knows exactly where you sleep. The night deepens, and the shadows within the stone corridors of the Louvre seem to stretch, reaching out like the fingers of a forgotten memory. We are now entering a time when Catherine's influence is no longer just a whisper, it is a weight. It is the mid-1550s. The air is still, but it is charged with the electricity of a coming storm. To understand how Catherine stayed safe in a world of daggers, we must look at how she turned her reputation into a fortress. Imagine the flickering light of a single tallow candle in a small, windowless room. The smell of old parchment, damp ink, and iron gall drifts through the air. This is the office of a man named Antoine d'Orbon. He is a clerk, a man of numbers and ledgers, someone the world would consider insignificant. But Antoine has a secret. He has been skimming gold from the royal treasury, a tiny trickle of wealth that he thought no one would ever notice. In this immersion, feel the cold sweat on a man's brow when he realizes he is no longer alone. One evening, as Antoine prepares to blow out his candle, a shadow falls across his desk. It is not a soldier. It is not a judge. It is a messenger from the Queen, carrying a small silk-bound folder. Inside is not an arrest warrant, but a detailed list of every coin Antoine has ever taken, dates, amounts, even the names of the merchants who helped him hide the trail. This is the transition into Catherine's most effective weapon, the reveal. She does not call for the executioner. She does not demand a public trial. Instead, she sends a message that is far more terrifying in its gentleness. The messenger simply tells Antoine that the queen is aware of his talents, and that such attention to detail would be better served in her private accounts. In this slow story of psychological capture, we see the true meaning of the poison queen. The poison was not in a cup, it was in the mind. Antoine d'Orbon becomes a ghost. He remains in his office. He continues his work, but he now belongs entirely to Catherine. He's a man walking through a dream, knowing that his life hangs by a single thread, held by a woman who never raises her voice. Feel a return to a quiet, heavy safety. Catherine has realized that a dead enemy is a wasted resource, but a terrified servant is a shield. As you lie there, imagine the rhythmic sound of a heartbeat steady, but perhaps a little too fast. This is the rhythm of the court under Catherine's gaze. Everyone is wondering, what does she know about me? She begins to cultivate the legend of her own supernatural reach. She invites astrologers like Cosimo Ruggieri to her private chambers, allowing the court to see the glow of strange fires and hear the chanting of ancient tongues. She lets the rumors of poison rings and dark mirrors spread like a mist through the drafty halls. Why? Because a man who believes his queen can see his thoughts will never dare to betray her. The reveal of this section is the realization that Catherine's darkness was a calculated masterpiece of branding. She wore the black of a widow and the silence of a sorceress, not because she was evil, but because she was vulnerable. She was a woman in a man's world, a foreigner in a xenophobic court. By becoming the spider, she ensured that no one would dare to touch the web. As the candle in Antoine d'Orbon's office finally gutters and dies, leaving him in the dark, feel the profound stillness of absolute control. Catherine is back in her high-backed chair, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes closed. She is not sleeping, she is listening to the silence she has created. The world outside is beginning to fracture. The religious tensions between the Catholics and the Huguenots are no longer just debates, they are becoming a fever. But inside her circle of influence, there is order. There is the safety of fear. Sleep now, drifting into the quietude of a palace where every secret is catalogued and every threat is neutralized before it can breathe. The clock is ticking toward a tragedy that will change the face of France forever, the death of a king. But for now, the weaver is at rest, and the threads are tight. Listen to the wind against the glass. It is the only thing she cannot control. For now. The year is 1559, and a strange, heavy stillness has settled over the city of Paris. The air is thick with the scent of summer roses and the metallic tang of cooling iron. For decades, Catherine has lived in the periphery, the patient wife, the silent observer, the mother of heirs. But tonight, the rhythmic ticking of the courtly clock is about to be interrupted by a sound that will haunt the foundations of France. The sound of a splintering wooden lance. In this immersion, I want you to feel the atmosphere of the royal tournament. Imagine the vibrant colors of the banners fluttering in a warm breeze, the cheering of the crowds, and the thundering beat of horses' hooves against the dry earth. King Henry II, Catherine's husband, is in the tilt-yard. He is tall, strong, and brimming with the misplaced confidence of a man who believes he is invincible. He rides against the young Count of Montgomery. They clash once, twice. On the third pass, the world seems to slow down. Crack. Dot. A splinter of Montgomery's lance pierces the king's golden visor, sinking deep into his eye and temple. The cheering stops. There is a silence so profound it feels like the world has held its breath. This is our transition into the dark sanctuary of the sick room. We move from the bright, chaotic sunlight of the tournament into a chamber draped in heavy velvet, smelling of vinegar, blood, and failed prayers. For 10 days, Henry lingers. 10 days of agonizing, slow breaths. Catherine sits by his bed, a statue in the shadows. She watches the man who never truly loved her slip away, and as his pulse weakens, she feels the weight of the crown beginning to shift. In this slow story of transformation, we see the safe world of the queen consort dissolve. When Henry finally breathes his last, the court doesn't just mourn, it panics. The power vacuum is a terrifying, yawning abyss. But Catherine does not panic. She stands up, wipes the sweat from her husband's cold brow, and steps into the hallway. She is no longer the Italian woman. She's the Queen Mother. She dresses herself in solid, unyielding black, a color she will never take off for the rest of her life. Feel the return to a new, colder kind of safety. Catherine realizes that her young son, Francis II, is now king, but he is a boy of 15, frail and overwhelmed. The wolves of the court, the Guise family, the Bourbons are already baring their teeth, ready to tear the kingdom apart for their own gain. In this moment, Catherine finds her true voice. It is not the voice of a victim, but the voice of a regent who will do anything to protect her cubs. The reveal of this section is the calculated nature of her grief. Her mourning is not just an emotion, it is a uniform. The black veil is her armor. It tells the world that she is untouchable, sanctified by her sorrow, and focused entirely on the survival of the Valois dynasty. She takes the seal of the realm into her hands, the cold gold pressing into her palm. She knows that from this night on, sleep will be a rare luxury. As you lie there, imagine the flickering shadows of the funeral candles reflecting in her dark eyes. The king is dead, but the queen is finally awake. The corridors of the Louvre are silent now, save for the heavy, rhythmic tread of the Swiss guard. Catherine is at her desk, lacing together the fractured pieces of a broken government. She is the only thing standing between France and total collapse. The night is vast and quiet. The stars over Paris are indifferent to the shift in power. But as you drift towards sleep, feel the immense, steady resolve of a woman who has waited 26 years for this moment. The lance has shattered, the crown is blooded, and the real reign of Catherine de Medici has just begun. Listen to the distant tolling of a single bell. Don't do it for ne. Pan certain schwal, pan out. Don't see. Sound. It marks the end of an era and the beginning of a legend. Sleep now, for the shadows of the Regency are long, and the path ahead is paved with iron. The air in France is changing now. It is no longer the sweet, heavy scent of the Renaissance court. It is becoming sharp, acidic, and carries the faint smell of burning timber. We are entering the 1560s, a decade where the very soul of the kingdom begins to tear in two. This is the era of the Huguenots, the French Protestants, and the staunch Catholic defenders. Religion is no longer a matter of the heart, it has become a matter of the sword. In this immersion, imagine the great hall of a provincial chateau at twilight. The blue hour is fading into a deep, bruised purple. Outside, the wind moans through the gargoyles, but inside, the tension is a physical weight. On one side of the long oak table sit the Bourbons, their eyes cold and defiant, representing the new faith. On the other side, the Guise family, clutching their rosaries like weapons. And in the center, a small figure in widow's weeds. Catherine. She is the needle trying to sew together two pieces of silk that are determined to fray. Feel the transition into the safe space of Catherine's strategy. She does not take a side. Not yet. She believes in the via media, the middle way. She organizes the colloquy of Poissy, a gathering where she forces the priests and the pastors to sit in the same room. Imagine the sound of the heavy iron doors closing, the echo of footsteps on the stone floor, and the low rhythmic murmur of debate. Words, or instead of blades. For a brief moment, Catherine creates a sanctuary of logic in a world of madness. She believes that if they can just talk, the kingdom can sleep in peace. But in this slow story of unraveling, we see the tragedy of moderation. To the Catholics, she is a traitor for even speaking to heretics. To the Protestants, she is a deceptive Jezebel. Catherine is walking a tightrope over a canyon of fire. She travels across France with her young son, King Charles IX, in a massive royal progress. It is a slow, grinding journey. Imagine the rhythmic thud-thud of the carriage wheels on the muddy roads, the creaking of the leather harnesses, and the endless, exhausting ceremonies. She is showing the people their king, trying to use the physical presence of the monarchy to heal the spiritual rift. return to a sense of quiet, heavy isolation. Every night, in a different castle, in a different drafty bedroom, Catherine sits by the embers of a dying fire. She is writing letters, thousands of letters. You can hear the frantic scratch of her quill. She is pleading for peace, bribing for time, and weaving a tapestry of compromise that no one else wants to wear. This is her safe harbor, the belief that she, through sheer force of will and intellect, can prevent the bloodbath. The reveal of this section is the chilling realization of her failure. Despite her flying squadron of ladies used to distract the noblemen, despite her edicts of tolerance, the first spark is struck. The massacre of Vassy. The peace is shattered like a glass goblet on a stone floor. The sounds of debate are replaced by the screams of the streets. Catherine realizes that her middle way has left her standing alone in the center of the battlefield. As you lie there, feel the coldness of the realization. The woman who mastered the court cannot master the heavens. The religious fury is a tide she cannot turn back with words. She looks at her children, the fragile Valois line, and she knows that the time for soft power is ending. The spider must now become the lioness. The night is silent, but the horizon is red. The kingdom is no longer sleeping. It is staring into the dark with wide, fearful eyes. But Catherine is already planning her next move. If she cannot bring peace through love, she will bring order through a terror so absolute it will silence the bells of France. Sleep now, in the fleeting stillness before the storm. The prayers are over. The iron is being forged, and the Queen Mother is closing her eyes, visualizing the map of a country that is about to bleed in the name of God. Listen to the distant, lonely call of a night bird. It is the only sound in a world waiting for the first scream of the Civil War. As the fires of the Civil War flicker on the horizon, we move deeper into the private candlelit chambers of the Queen Mother. The year is 1564. The air here is different. It is still, fragrant with the scent of dried lavender and the faint, metallic tang of the keys Catherine wears at her waist. We are no longer looking at a politician among men, but a mother among her children. This is where Catherine's power becomes absolute, woven into the very blood and bone of the Valois dynasty. In this immersion, imagine the nursery of a king. It is a room of immense, luxury-heavy brocade curtains. Floors covered in thick Persian rugs that swallow the sound of every footstep. But there is a stifling quality to the air. Catherine's children Charles, Henry, Marguerite, and Alençon are not just her offspring. They are her masterpieces and her puppets. She moves among them like a shadow, her hand always resting on a shoulder, her eyes always watching. She has realized that to rule France, she must first rule the minds of its rulers. Feel the transition into the safe, yet suffocating embrace of her maternal control. She creates the Flying Squadron, a group of the most beautiful and intelligent women in France, ostensibly to serve as ladies-in-waiting. But in reality, they are her eyes and ears. Imagine the soft rustle of silk in the hallways, the low, musical laughter of these women, as they draw secrets from the powerful men of the court. Catherine sits at the center of this web, a mother who provides everything her children desire: pleasure, art, spectacle, as long as they never look away from her. In this slow story of psychological dominance, we see the fragility of King Charles IX. He is a boy of nerves and shadows, prone to fits of rage and bouts of weeping. Catherine does not punish him, she protects him. She tells him that the world is a forest of wolves, and that she is the only one who can keep the beasts at bay. You can almost hear her voice, a low, rhythmic whisper in his ear. Trust no one but your mother. Only I can see the dagger behind the smile. She occupies his time with hunting and elaborate festivals, keeping his hands busy so his mind never wanders toward independence. Return to a sense of heavy, somber safety. Catherine is the architect of the Grand Tour of France, a 2-year journey where she drags the entire court across the kingdom. Imagine the rhythmic thud-thud of 100 carriages, the endless line of horses, the exhaustion of the road. Why? Because a court in motion is a court she can control. No noble can plot in their castle if they are trapped in a royal procession. She keeps them tired, she keeps them distracted, and she keeps them under her wing. The reveal of this section is the chilling realization of the price her children paid for her protection. She loved them with a ferocity that bordered on the predatory. To keep the crown on their heads, she stripped them of their agency. She married them off like chess pieces, broke their spirits to ensure their loyalty, and turned her love into a velvet cage. She was the only constant in their chaotic world, a dark sun around which they were forced to orbit. As you lie there, imagine the palace falling silent for the night. Catherine walks through the darkened nursery, adjusting a blanket here, snuffing a candle there. She is the eternal guardian, the woman who took the chaos of a kingdom and confined it within the walls of her family. But beneath the silence, there is a growing resentment. Her children are growing older, and the world outside is screaming for blood. The night is cold, and the shadows of the Valois are long. Catherine closes her door, the heavy iron bolts sliding home with a final, echoing thud. She is safe. Her children are safe. But the air is thin, and the velvet glove is beginning to feel more and more like a gauntlet of cold steel. Sleep now, in the stillness of a house where the mother sees everything and forgets nothing. The drums of the great massacre are still silent, but the seeds of the betrayal are being sown in the very beds she just tucked in. Listen to the heartbeat of the palace. It is steady, slow, and entirely hers. The year is 1570, and the air in the halls of the Louvre has grown thin and heavy, like the atmosphere before a great mountain storm. We are entering the decade of Catherine's most absolute political mastery. She is no longer just a mother or a regent. She has become the invisible architect of France's destiny. The great noble houses, the Guises, the Bourbons, the Montmorencys are like towering oaks that threaten to crush the Valois sapling. But Catherine has learned that you do not chop down an oak with an axe. You starve its roots in the dark. In this immersion, imagine a grand banquet in a hall lined with mirrors and flickering silver candelabras. The sound is a constant, low hum of forced laughter and the clinking of crystal. This is Catherine's safe trap. She has invited the most powerful and dangerous men in Europe to her table. Look at her sitting at the head still in her unyielding black, her face a pale, unreadable mask. She has realized that a noble who is feasting at her expense is a noble who is not in his province raising an army. She uses the magnificence of the court as a weapon of debt. She encourages them to spend fortunes on silk, on jewelry, on Italian art, until they are so financially tethered to the crown that they cannot afford to rebel. Feel the transition into the slow story of her psychological isolation tactics. She moves between these giants like a shadow, dropping a single sentence here, a quiet question there. To the Duke of Guise, she whispers of the Bourbons' secret meetings. To the Bourbons, she hints at the Guises' hidden daggers. She is the only source of truth in a room full of liars. You can hear the rhythmic, hypnotic sound of her fan opening and closing. Snap, dot, and slide. Snap, and slide. It is the heartbeat of her manipulation. She keeps them in a state of perpetual, low-level anxiety, ensuring that they fear each other more than they could ever unite against her. Now, return to the safe sanctuary of her private cabinet. Imagine the walls lined with small, locked wooden drawers. Each drawer contains a life a gambling debt, an illicit love letter, a record of a secret conversation. This is her gold mine of retention. She doesn't use these secrets to destroy people immediately. She uses them to anchor them. A nobleman who knows the Queen Mother holds his darkest secret will sleep fitfully, but he will always vote the way she desires. She has turned the entire aristocracy into a collection of beautiful, tethered birds in her royal aviary. The reveal of this section is the chilling sophistication of her drift. She isn't seeking a military victory. She is seeking a total psychological surrender. She has replaced the chaos of war with the stagnation of her court. She has made herself the sun, and the nobles are merely planets trapped in her gravitational pull, unable to break away, yet unable to get too close without burning. She has mastered the art of being necessary. As the banquet ends and the guests stumble to their chambers, heavy with wine and secrets, feel the profound silence that returns to Catherine's side. She stands alone on the balcony, looking out over the sleeping city of Paris. The spider has finished the outer rings of her web. Every giant is silenced, every threat is managed, and every string leads back to her pale, steady hands. But the night air is cold, and even the most perfect web can be torn by a single, desperate act of violence. The safe world she has built is about to face its most horrific test. The bells of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois are silent for now, but they are waiting for the signal. Sleep now, in the stillness of a world where one woman's mind has outpaced every sword in the kingdom. The giants are sleeping, unaware that they are already in chains. Listen to the distant rhythmic tap of a guard's halberd on the stone. Tap, tap, dot, tap, dot. Everything is under control. For tonight, the air in Paris on the night of August 23rd, 1572, is thick, stagnant, and unnervingly warm. It is the height of summer, yet a cold shiver seems to run through the very stones of the Louvre. We have reached the darkest corridor of our journey. This is the night when the spider's web was not used to catch secrets, but to trap an entire city. In this immersion, imagine the city of Paris holding its breath. The grand wedding of Catherine's daughter, Marguerite, to the Protestant King Henry of Navarre was supposed to be a bridge of peace. But the bridge is collapsing. Thousands of Huguenots have flocked to the city, sleeping in the streets and inns, unaware that the air they breathe is already poisoned by intent. Catherine sits in her private chamber, the only light coming from a single dying candle. The sound of the city is a low, rhythmic murmur, the sound of thousands of people dreaming of a future that will never arrive. Feel the transition into the slow story of the final, desperate decision. Catherine is no longer the weaver of compromises. She is a woman backed into a corner. An assassination attempt on the Protestant leader, Admiral Coligny, has failed, and the city is a powder keg. Her son, King Charles IX, is spiraling into madness, pacing the room, screaming that he wants them all dead so no one remains to reproach him. Catherine stands before him, her voice a low, steady anchor in his storm. "It is them or us," she whispers. It is a moment of total, horrific clarity. To save the Valois, she believes she must destroy the opposition in a single, surgical strike. The silence of the night is shattered. Imagine the sudden, clanging iron tolling of the bell at Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois. Clang dot-o. Clang dot-e. Clang dot-e. This is the signal. In an instant, the safe world of the wedding guests becomes a slaughterhouse. This is not a battle. It is a nightmare unleashed. We do not look at the violence directly, but at the shadow it casts. We hear the rhythmic, heavy thud of boots on cobblestones, the splintering of doors, and the frantic, distant echoes of a city losing its soul. Catherine remains in the Louvre, a silhouette against the window, watching the torches flicker in the dark like fallen stars. Return to a hollow, haunting sense of safety. By dawn, the city is eerily quiet. The tension that had gripped France for a decade has been broken, but at a price that can never be repaid. Catherine has secured her son's throne, but she has lost the world's respect. She is now forever the Poison Queen, not because of a toxin in a glass, but because of the blood on her hands. As the sun rises over the Seine, painting the water a deep, deceptive crimson, she turns away from the window. She has survived. Her children have survived. But the safe harbor she built is now a fortress of ghosts. The reveal of this section is the chilling pragmatism of her soul. History remembers this as a religious massacre, but for Catherine, It was a brutal necessity of statecraft. She did not kill for God. She killed for the crown. She watches the morning mist roll over the rooftops, her face as cold as the marble saints in the cathedral. She has silenced the Huguenot threat, but she has also ensured that she will never truly sleep in peace again. As you lie there, feel the heavy, oppressive stillness that follows the storm. The bells have stopped ringing. The streets are being washed clean by a sudden cooling rain. Catherine is back at her desk, her quill moving with its usual rhythmic scritch-scritch. She is already writing to the Pope, to the kings of Europe, explaining, justifying, weaving a new story from the wreckage of the old. She is the ultimate survivor, a woman who looked into the abyss and decided to rule it. The night is fading into the gray of early morning. The nightmare is over, but the shadow of St. Bartholomew will follow her until her last breath. Listen to the rain against the glass. It is a soft, repetitive sound, trying to drown out the memory of the bells. Sleep now, for the blood has dried, and the Queen Mother is once again the only one awake in a kingdom of the dead. Everything is still. The web is broken, but the spider remains. The year is now 1580, and the air within the Chateau de Blois is cold, carrying the damp, gray breath of the Loire River. We are entering the twilight of Catherine's life. The vibrant, gold-leafed world of her youth has faded, replaced by the stark, monochromatic reality of a widow who has outlived almost everyone she ever loved. She is in her 60s now, her body heavy with gout and the exhaustion of half a century of survival. The spider is still at the center of the web, but the silk is beginning to fray, and the vibrations from the outside world are growing more violent. In this immersion, imagine the Queen Mother's private oratory at 3 a.m. The only sound is the rhythmic hollow tock-tock of a mechanical clock and the distant, lonely whistle of the wind through the stone balustrades. Catherine is kneeling, her black velvet robes pooling around her like a shadow. She is surrounded by the ghosts of her sons Francis, taken by a fever, Charles, consumed by the madness of his lungs. Only Henry III remains, her favorite, yet he is a king who hides from his duties behind a wall of jewels and favorites. Catherine realizes that she is the only one left who truly remembers how to hold the kingdom together. Feel the transition into a slow story of profound, regal isolation. She is no longer the predator. She is the guardian of a crumbling house. She travels one last time across the south of France, carried in a litter because she can no longer ride. Imagine the rhythmic swaying motion of the litter, the heavy breathing of the porters, and the sight of a landscape scarred by decades of war. She meets with her son-in-law, Henry of Navarre, trying to negotiate one final peace. You can hear her voice now thin and raspy, yet still carrying the unmistakable authority of a Medici. "I have seen too much blood," she whispers, "and yet the earth is still thirsty." Return to a sense of heavy, somber safety. Despite the chaos, Catherine finds solace in her collections. Imagine her walking through a room filled with hundreds of portraits, the faces of the people she has known, loved, and destroyed. This is her safe memory palace. Here, the dead do not argue. They do not plot. They simply watch. She finds a strange peace in the order of her archives, the meticulous way she has catalogued the sins and virtues of an entire century. She is the librarian of France's secrets, and in that knowledge, she remains the most powerful person in the room, even if her hands tremble as she holds the key. The reveal of this section is the crushing weight of her maternal failure. She saved the throne for her sons, but in doing so, she drained them of their strength. She watches Henry III pull away from her, his decisions becoming erratic and violent. She realizes that the iron fist she used to protect them has become a barrier between them. She is the mother who did too much, the architect who built a fortress so strong that she trapped herself inside it. The silence of the palace is no longer a strategic choice. It is a symptom of her growing irrelevance. As you lie there, feel the slow, steady fading of the candlelight. The Queen Mother is back in her bed, the heavy furs providing little warmth to her aching bones. She can hear the distant, rhythmic chanting of the monks in the chapel below, praying for a peace that she knows will not come in her lifetime. She is alone in the dark, a woman who traded her soul for the survival of a name, only to realize that the name might die with her. The night is vast, and the river flows on, indifferent to the rise and fall of queens. But Catherine is not afraid of the dark. She has lived in it for so long that it feels like an old friend. She closes her eyes, her mind still racing, still planning, still weaving threads even as the loom begins to break. Sleep now in the quietude of a life that has been lived to the absolute limit. The great Queen Mother is resting, her black veil discarded, her secrets finally becoming part of the shadows. Listen to the river. It is the sound of time passing, carrying away the glory and the guilt of the Valois. Everything is still. For now. Look closely. Not at the throne, not at the sprawling maps of France, but at a single, small object resting on a velvet cushion. A ring. It is made of dull silver etched with delicate Italian filigree and set with a hollow stone. For centuries, the world whispered that this ring held a secret spring that with a flick of her thumb, Catherine could drop a tasteless, scentless white powder into a rival's wine. This is the Poison Queen of legend. This is the story the world chose to believe because it was simpler than the truth. In this stillness, let us breathe in the cold irony of that image. The world wanted a witch, so they carved her out of shadow. They spoke of the queen's poison as if it were a liquid in a vial, when in reality, the most effective toxin Catherine ever used was the truth she held over people's heads. Can you hear the silence of the laboratory? Not a place of bubbling cauldrons, but a room of ledgers and encoded letters. Her poison was information. It was the slow, steady drip of a secret revealed at the exact moment it would do the most damage. It was the way she could paralyze a man's will without ever touching his skin. As you lie there, imagine the weight of that reputation. Catherine did not fight the rumors of her dark arts. She wore them like a heavy protective cloak. If the nobles believed she had a mirror that could see their deaths, they were less likely to plot against her. If they feared her Italian toxins, they would eat at her table with their heads bowed in submission. The Poison Queen was a masterclass in psychological warfare. She turned their own superstition into her strongest fortress. But there is a sadness in this legacy. In this slow story of her final days, we see a woman who became a ghost before she even died. She looks at the halls of the Louvre and sees the emptiness of her victories. Her sons are gone, her name is a curse in the streets, and the very country she tried to save treats her like an alien parasite. The spider has outlived her own web. You can hear the rhythmic, shallow breath of an old woman who has realized that you can control a kingdom, but you can never control how that kingdom remembers you. The reveal here is not about a hidden murder, but about a hidden sacrifice. Every ruthless act, every drop of blood spilled in the night, was a payment for the survival of a crown that her children were too weak to wear. She became the villain so they could play the role of kings. She took the stain upon her own soul to keep the fleur-de-lis white. The night is growing very thin now. The silver ring is just a piece of cold metal. The vials are empty. The legends are beginning to harden into the history books. As the candle flame flickers one last time, realize that Catherine de Medici didn't survive because she was evil. She survived because she understood, better than any man of her time, that power is not a gift, it is a debt paid in shadow. Return to a sense of total, heavy calm. The battles are over. The whispers have faded into the dust of the archives. There is no more poison to fear, only the long, deep sleep of a century that is finally coming to an end. Listen to the silence. It is not the silence of a secret anymore. It is the silence of a life that has been completely spent. Sleep now, for the Queen is letting go of the threads. The long, winding corridors of the 16th century are finally fading into the mist. We have reached the end of the labyrinth, where the stone walls of the Chateau de Blois meet the cold gray sky of January 1589. Outside, a winter storm is brewing, but inside Catherine's chamber, the air is perfectly still. The spider is no longer weaving. Her hands, once so busy with the threads of a nation, are now resting, pale and quiet, upon the white linen of her deathbed. In this final immersion, let the boundaries of time dissolve. Can you hear the sounds of her life one last time? The rhythmic splashing of the Mediterranean against the galley in Marseille, the frantic scratchy quill in the middle of a Parisian night, the heavy, tolling bell of Saint Bartholomew. They are no longer separate moments. They are a single, fading heartbeat. Catherine is not looking at the future anymore. She is becoming a part of the past. She is the last of the Medici, the last of the true Valois power, and as her breath grows shallow, the era of the Renaissance itself seems to draw a final weary sigh. Feel the deep, resonant safety of this conclusion. The burden of the crown is being lifted. The secrets that kept her awake for 70 years are finally being released into the shadows. There is no more need for the flying squadron, no more need for the iron fist, and no more need for the black veil of the widow. As you lie there, imagine the weight of history becoming as light as a single falling feather. The woman who was called a witch, a mother, and a queen is now just a soul seeking the quietude of the eternal. The reveal of this final section is the viral loop of her existence. As Catherine closes her eyes for the last time, she knows that the story does not end with her. She is a bridge. Behind her lies the fractured, bloody chaos of the religious wars. Ahead of her lies the rise of the Bourbons and the eventual sun-drenched glory of Louis XIV. She was the one who held the door open through the darkest hour so that France could walk into the light. Her legacy is not in the blood she spilled, but in the country that remained standing when the smoke cleared. As the room grows dark, let your mind drift to the great Basilica of Saint Denis, where she will eventually rest. The marble effigy of the Queen Mother lies there, silent and serene. But listen closely to the silence. It is a living thing. It carries a question that echoes through the centuries. In a world of wolves, what would you have done to save your children? This is the loop that keeps her story alive. Every time someone speaks of power, sacrifice, or of the shadows behind the throne, Catherine de Medici is there, watching from the corners of history. She is the eternal reminder that survival has a price, and that peace is often bought with the coin of a heavy conscience. The candle has flickered out. The ink has dried. The loom is empty. Listen to your own breath now. In and out, slow and deep. You are safe. The storms of the 1500s are centuries away. The Poison Queen is a legend, the spider is a ghost, and the night is yours. The tapestry of her life is complete, and it is time for you to fold your own thoughts into the velvet darkness. The palace is silent. The river is still. Queen Mother is at rest. Sleep now, into the long, long, golden dream of history.